Hi, thanks for joining me on Give Cheese a Chance, where I encourage you to make cheese at home. I'm Marianne. Today we're going to be making Colby cheese in the kitchen. Now, Colby is an American cheese which was invented in 1885 in the city of Colby, Wisconsin. It is known as a moist cheese, a mild cheese, and a firm cheese, and it's often referred to as Cheddar's milder cousin. Now, over the last 8 months, I have made lots of different Colby recipes, some of which I'm showing you on this table right now. And I feel very confident in the recipe for Colby that I'm going to show you today. I feel it is the most successful of all the recipes I've tried. So there is one warning. This recipe requires a lot of stirring. So make sure you have a book handy, or a magazine, or a phone to call someone while you do all of that stirring. So let's get busy making Colby in the kitchen. Here's a list of the ingredients that we will need for this recipe. So we're going to be using 3 gallons or 12 liters worth of whole cow's milk for this recipe. This is pasteurized and unhomogenized milk. It's from the Harmony Dairy in Ontario, Canada. So this milk has a slightly higher milk fat percentage than most of the milks that I use. Usually the milk that I use has 3.25% milk fat. This has 3.8% milk fat. And as I said before, it is unhomogenized. So all of the butter fat has not been incorporated into the milk. It's sort of got little clumps of butter fat, and you're going to see when I pour it into the pot, those clumps rise to the surface. And I don't want you to be alarmed by that. Those clumps of butter fat are going to take care of themselves as we go through the recipe. So with cheese making, it's always preferable to use unhomogenized milk. It sets a better curd and it makes a cheese that is more meltable. So if you don't have access to unhomogenized milk, maybe it's too expensive or you can't find it at your local grocery store, don't worry, you can still do this recipe. You'll just find the curd is a little bit drier, the cheese doesn't melt as well, and the curds, when you add the rennet, will be a little bit more delicate. It's still going to have a great flavor. It'll taste like Colby in the end. So again, always try and use unhomogenized milk if you can. So let's add our milk to the pot. So I'm going to heat this milk slowly and gently until it reaches 86 degrees Fahrenheit or 30 degrees Celsius, stirring occasionally. And be careful, it doesn't take long to reach that target temperature. And while you're heating your milk, go ahead and set up another pot full of non-chlorinated water and just let it sit there until we need it later. Make sure you stir the milk so that the warmer milk at the bottom gets mixed with the cooler milk at the top as we're heating our milk. You can see all of that butter fat that is floating to the top that I told you about before. Again, don't be concerned about it. It's going to be incorporated into this cheese later. So we've reached our target temperature of 86 degrees Fahrenheit or 30 degrees Celsius. It's time to turn off the stove completely. We don't want to add any more heat to our milk. And the next step would be to add our bacterial culture to the milk. I'm using today a mesophilic type 2 freeze-dried bacterial culture. If you don't have this one, you can use M811 as a good alternative. So we're just going to add half a teaspoon of this bacterial culture, and we're going to sprinkle it onto the surface of the milk. And we're going to let it sit there for about 3 minutes before mixing it in. So the 3 minutes have now passed, and we want to mix the bacterial culture into the milk. We're going to stir for 1 whole minute, and it's important to push the milk that's at the top into the bottom of the pot. And that's because we know our bacterial culture is resting on the surface, and if we just mix round and round, well, we're just spinning a frisbee round and round. We want to push that milk at the top into the bottom until it's thoroughly incorporated. We're going to let this incubate for 1 whole hour, and at that time, the bacteria are going to wake up and they're going to start converting lactose into lactic acid. So I'll see you in 1 hour. While waiting, measure out 1/3 of a teaspoon of annatto coloring and add it to a 1/4 cup of non-chlorinated water and stir. Annatto is the coloring agent added to cheeses like cheddar to give it that orange color, but it doesn't affect the taste. If you don't have any annatto, you can leave it out. And add 3/4 of a teaspoon of liquid calcium chloride into a 1/4 cup of non-chlorinated water and stir. Adding calcium back into the milk is important to restore calcium that was lost during the processing of the milk, and it helps to set the curd better. And finally, put a 1/2 tablet of rennet into a 1/4 cup of non-chlorinated water and let it dissolve. Rennet is a critical ingredient that turns liquid milk into a gel-like state. So our 1 hour timer is now up, and it's time to add our other ingredients. First, we're going to add our annatto mixture into the pot and stir. And then we're going to add our calcium chloride solution into the pot and stir as well. And lastly, we're going to add our rennet solution. We're always going to make sure that the rennet is added last because it starts to work immediately. So stir in your rennet solution for 1 minute, not longer, and then cover the pot and let it sit undisturbed for 45 minutes. So the timer is now done. Let's take a look inside the pot. There is that layer of buttercream on the surface. We're trying to look beyond the buttercream to see the curd underneath. We want to check now that the milk has fully gelled. We're looking for a clean break. And we do that by taking a knife and inserting it into the curd. Does it feel like a solid or a semi-solid? Does it open cleanly? Well, that has separated into 2 separate pieces, and that is definitely a clean break. If you don't have a clean break when you do this recipe at home, just put the lid back on, let it sit another 10 minutes, and then try this test again 10 minutes later. So we have a good solid curd set here, and it's time to cut the curd into cubes 1/2 inch or 1 centimeter apart. Now the other direction. Okay, and now the trickier part is doing horizontal cuts, so just do the best you can. It's really hard to see all of your cuts with all that buttercream on the top. And now we're going to let those curds heal for 5 minutes. The next step is to heat these curds very gently over a 40-minute period so that the temperature increases just to 103 degrees Fahrenheit or 40 degrees Celsius, and we're going to be stirring the entire time that we heat these curds. So turn your stove on to its lowest setting. There we go. I'm going to use a rubber spatula at first, and then I'm going to switch over to a long metal spoon, but I just find the rubber spatula is more gentle on the curds in the beginning. We're going to very carefully start to separate the curds and to stir them very carefully because the curds are very fragile at the beginning. And stir them a little bit, and you'll find a lot of that butter will stick to your spoon, which is another reason why I like to switch spoons later on. So we really are heating the curds very gently. We're basically increasing the temperature 4 degrees Fahrenheit for every 10 minutes, or 1 degree Celsius every 4 minutes. It is a very gradual heating of the curds. Make sure that temperature is quite low, and every once in a while, take your thermometer and check the temperature. I know it can be a little boring to stir a pot for such a long time, so do things to keep yourself busy. Call a friend, read a book, play a game on your phone, or just have a glass of wine. Just keep stirring those curds. Well, our 40-minute timer is now done, and our temperature is at 103 degrees Fahrenheit or 40 degrees Celsius. Now we're going to turn off the heat completely and stir for another 15 minutes. Meanwhile, bring your pot of non-chlorinated water to the 60 degree Fahrenheit or 16 degree Celsius mark. So you might have to add some ice cubes, or you might have to add a little heat, but do what you can to bring it to 60 degrees Fahrenheit or 16 Celsius. So our 15-minute curd cooking time has now finished, and we can stop stirring, and we want to let the curds settle to the bottom of the pot over a 2-minute period. The next step we're going to do is called washing the curds. This is where we're going to remove a lot of the whey down to the level of the curds, and we're going to replace it with our cool 60-degree water. And you can do a lot of things with the whey that we are removing right now. You can feed it to your pets. You can make soup with it. You can use it to bake bread, or you can just pour it into your garden. And of course, you can make ricotta from it. So we're now definitely down to the level of the curds, and I'm going to scoop this cool water, and I'm going to keep adding it until my thermometer reads 87 degrees Fahrenheit or 30 degrees Celsius. We're going to stir it a little bit too, make sure it's thoroughly mixed. So right now the temperature is at 91 Fahrenheit. I need it to go down a little bit more. So the temperature has now come to 87 degrees. So I'm going to continue to stir it for 15 minutes while I give my curds a bath. The 15-minute curd wash point is now finished. Yay, no more stirring. So now we can take the pot over to the sink. We're going to put a fine strainer in the sink. We're going to pour all of our curds through it and separate the curds from the whey. And we're going to let those drain for 5 minutes. And once the curds are finished draining, we want to put our fabric into our mold and then gently mill the curds with our hands and fill the mold. We want to push down those curds every time we add more to the mold. So mill the curds and fill the mold and push down. And when we have filled the mold completely, just use the leftover fabric at the top to cover the cheese and put your follower on top and place it in your cheese press. For our first 30-minute pressing, we're going to put 35 pounds on the top. And we're going to let that sit for 30 minutes. So we finished our 30-minute time with 35 pounds on the cheese. And so we're going to remove the weight. We're going to take the cheese out of the press and take a look at it. Wow, it looks really good already. We're going to redress it by removing the fabric, flipping the cheese upside down, and putting it back in the press. So you can see that there are some mechanical holes already. That's okay, because those are probably going to go away as we press this cheese even more. So back in it goes. We're going to cover it up, put the follower on, put it back in the press. And we're putting back the same weight. So 35 pounds back on the cheese for another 30 minutes. The time is now up, so we're going to remove the weight. We're going to take the cheese out of the press. Wow. It looks even better than before. Look at that. That is looking beautiful. We're going to redress it and put it back in the press again. And this time we're going to press it for 45 pounds for 1 hour. We'll see you in an hour. So the 1 hour timer is up. And let's do the same thing that we've done before. We're going to take out our cheese, flip it over, and rewrap it again. Gosh, it's looking better every time. Got a few wrinkles, but that's okay. That looks gorgeous. And we're going to press it at a heavier weight, this time 55 pounds. And we're going to leave it in the press for 8 hours or overnight. I'll see you tomorrow morning. It's now the next day, and we're going to take this cheese out of the press and take a look at it, and we're going to weigh it. Look at that. That looks great. What a beauty. That is a beautiful cheese. Okay, let's see how much it weighs. Wow. So in grams, it's 1,472 grams, so about 1.5 kilograms or 3.4 pounds. That's a pretty good sized cheese. Usually for every gallon of milk, we get a pound of cheese, and that's the case here. The next step is to introduce salt into our cheese, and that will improve the flavor, it'll help preserve it, and it'll also help develop a better rind by extracting more moisture out of the cheese. Now, the rule for brining a cheese is you keep it in a heavy brine for a Colby for 12 hours per kilogram. And since this is 1.5 kilograms, we need to keep it in the brine for 18 hours. Now, I have a brine already prepared here, but if you don't have a brine already, I'm going to provide you with a recipe for one. And all you have to do is take your cheese and immerse it into the brine and let it sit there for 18 hours. Pretty easy. Just make sure every few hours you come by and you give it a flip so that all of the surfaces of the cheese are exposed to the salty brine. I'll see you in 18 hours. Well, I've just taken this cheese out of the brine, and the next step is to dry it. It needs to dry for about 2 to 4 days, so make sure you place it on a mat and flip it every few hours during that period so that all of the surfaces dry equally. And then you have to protect the coat. You can vacuum seal it or you can wax it. It's up to you. You want to store this cheese in a cool environment for 2 months before you eat it. The ideal temperature is 10 to 13 degrees Celsius or 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit. And make sure during that 2-month storage period, you flip it every day or two. Well, that's it for my video on Colby. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and make sure you hit the subscribe button so you can see my videos in the future. Also, feel free to visit my other cheese making videos. For example, how to make labneh, mozzarella, feta, crottin, and valencay. That's just some of a few, and there's more to come. Until then, I hope to see you back here on Give Cheese a Chance, and enjoy your cheese making.